Welcome along to the Make Life Work podcast with me, Si Jobling. I'm a software engineering manager, father of two, and in any spare time, I try to work on a variety of side projects, including communities and podcasts. Based on all this, I like to share my thoughts and experiences with fellow people from around tech about how we all try to find a balance for day jobs, life, and any side projects. For the 7th season of the podcast, we're continuing the project-specific format from Season 6. By diving into their projects, we hope to uncover some of the tips and tricks everyone uses to make them happen, so you lovely listeners can learn from our experiences to complete your own side hustles. This week, we're joined by Mubasher Iqbal, commonly known as Mubs, a serial side project maker living in New York, USA. Mubs has always fascinated me with all the side projects he's made over the years. Apparently, he's now got over 100 in his portfolio. It was following the success of his Founderpath side project turning into his main job that I was keen to get him along to talk about how that journey went, so ideally we can all learn some tricks from him. As a family man, he's also worked out a great balance to keep everyone happy. This is Making Founderpath with Mubs. So, welcome along, Mubs. How are you?
Yeah, good. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. It's Thursday for me. Obviously, it's the same for you, but different time zones.
Yeah, in New York, so it's just gone 12 o'clock here.
Got it. So lunchtime for you, end of the day, dinner time for me. Depending where you're from, tea time for some people in the UK. Yes. Good to catch up with you anyway. And thank you for joining us on the Make Life Work podcast. I've long been a follower and admirer of your work, so it's fascinating to get you involved. And hopefully we'll find some interesting things about you.
I hope I'm interesting.
I'm pretty sure there will be, as we get into the detail, obviously, later on. Before we get into everything, it'd be great to hear your sort of backstory. What got you into tech and some of the highlights maybe from the past few years, let's say.
So I've been interested in tech for a really long time. So I think my family got, I think it was a VIC-20 or something. It's a Commodore VIC-20 when I was about 8 years old. Primarily it was bought for my siblings, but I was 8 and all my siblings were a little bit older, but I was the one who used it all the time. So starting about 8 was when I started just hacking around with code and playing video games and so all that kind of stuff. And so it just kind of stuck with me. I was, interested in sort of high school, went to university and studied computer science. That led me into the internet. I got really hooked onto the internet. My first job out of university was on the internet back in 1996. And so just been interested in that space ever since. Gave me the opportunity to move out to California. Was in San Francisco during like the real first internet heyday and stuff like that. So got sucked into the startup scene for a while. Went into agency life more recently. I spent the last probably 15 years in agency life, and then over the last couple of years, I've been working at Founderpath, which is a company that's based out of Austin, but that's kind of startup life now again.
So that was a real fast whistle-stop tour of your last 20-odd years, 25 years, I think you were saying.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, started when I was about 8, but really professionally, I started working in 1996.
Sure.
So, and been working on kind of startups and sort of the web and kind of internet that sort of whole time.
Fair play. And I like how, I completely relate to that VIC-20 moment. I think we had a Commodore 64, which is virtually the same thing, right? Slightly different brand. And yeah, like you, coding, got into it and got hooked. And then in the sort of the late 90s, the internet was coming out. You're like, hey, this is a new media form. I like where this is going. And yeah, and then like you say, the history was made at that point by the sound of it for you.
Yeah, it was kind of on kind of accident in terms of like nobody knew what the internet was gonna be or anything like that, but it sounded interesting. And the first job, out of university, I wanted something interesting. I didn't want to go work at big stuffy company and stuff like that. So ended up working at a really small. It was actually funny. It was actually an Australian company that was operating in the UK, kind of at the time. And then after about 6 months to a year of me working there, they decided they were going to move from Australia to San Francisco, which is when they offered me the option to kind of move to San Francisco as well. And then that was a real start of my sort of online work and all these kind of side hustles and things like that I've been doing ever since. I think had I stayed in England, I don't know if I would have been quite as active and quite as prolific as I have been.
True. And like you say, obviously you've got the English background, but you've been in the States, as we were saying in the pre-recordings, for the last 25 years, really. So that must have been a huge inspiration for you, being surrounded by such amazing potential, I guess.
Yeah, and I like I said, luckily I was in San Francisco during that first internet really big boom that happened. Met a lot of people, really interesting people with lots of different skills. You kind of got exposed to design, front end, back end engineers, all of that kind of stuff, and also just like the entrepreneurs as well. Like I think that's what I would have missed had I been in England. I mean, I think there's lots of really talented, smart people in England. A lot of people I still work with actually still live in England as well now. But that sort of entrepreneurial spirit, I think, is really something that's quite unique to the States. Yes, there's kind of a few of those people sort of over in England too, but there's just lots of them over here.
Yeah, I think you're right, and especially in those sort of hives of it, like Silicon Valley and New York and the coastal areas as well. Yes. You're probably drawn to that by the sound of it, and the fact that you were going to be surrounded by innovative, entrepreneurial mindsets that will inspire you in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I was always, like I said, since I started, hacking on computers and stuff. Well, since I was always interested in new technology, new things, and being in San Francisco, that's San Francisco and Silicon Valley, everything's new there. Every few years they kind of reinvent kind of what's new. Originally it was the semiconductor industry, and then it moved to the internet, and then e-commerce, and then now it's like Web3 and NFTs and sort of all of that sort of online stuff as well. So it always seems to spark itself and kind of reinvent itself as well. So now that we've kind of got into a more connected world and more online world, we don't need to be there anymore. But it's still nice to kind of see a lot of that stuff's happening there, and we can kind of tap into it as well now.
Fair point. And obviously, you've spent a lot of time innovating in your own space, and I've always seen you as like this side project hustler, or I don't know how you're going to phrase it. You've always been involved in side projects. Do you want to tell us about some of your favorite highlights through the past sort of 20 odd years? But what stands out for you?
Yeah, and again, this also kind of happened by accident too. But in terms of because back when I started, I think I built my first side project probably in like 2001. And so nobody knew what side projects were back then. Nobody knew what a side hustle was. It just wasn't a thing. But I started off just, it was just like I was in the US, but I still had this interest in English soccer and things like that. So my first project was just something to track the results of all of the football matches that were on. And who was going to be playing who and when they were going to be playing. And so, obviously being in England, all of that stuff's on the TV and in the newspapers and everything. And everybody's talking about that. Being in the US, I was kind of cut off from that. So it was very hard to kind of stay up to date with kind of what was happening and who was playing and kind of what all the scores were and everything like that. So back in 2001, I built an online website that kind of automated that for me and like pulled in all the scores and so that was like my first little exposure to it. I was just building something for myself that I could use and kind of keep up to date with that. And then it just kind of spun out of that. Every time I had something, a thought like that, I just ended up building something new. And I think, over the year, I mean, I've well over 100 side projects now over the last 20 years, but it all just started from that that need of something to kind of have that I could build that I didn't really want anybody else. Then nobody else was building those things kind of at the time. And then I think eventually over the years it turned into more of there's this new technology, there's this new library, there's this new language I want to experiment with. Why don't I build something with it so I can learn and kind of see kind of how things work and then I can apply it to my startup or my agency or whatever it is as well. So that kind of turned into that. In terms of highlights, though, I think the sort of biggest project in terms of like people might have heard of it, and I've had random conversations with people, and they've been, they're like, I saw that when it launched, and so in I think it was 2017, I built with a friend of mine from Bulgaria. More of this online random people that you meet. But yeah, I built a website called Will Robots Take My Job?
Yeah.
And it was a quick, like 2-weekend project that we had. And in like the first week, it had 4 million page views.
That is insane.
It just went kind of nuts. It was at the right time. There was a lot of, there was a lot of interest about like AI and robotics. Like, are they going to take everybody's work? Is, how much automation is going to happen and things like that. And so we launched this project. We put it up on Hacker News. We put it on Product Hunt. And then that afternoon it landed on like the homepage of MSN and kind of things like that. So it was like, it was a very simple website to build. It was very easy to kind of put out there. I was really surprised about how much interest it kind of pulled. So that was really cool one. And then, I think over years, in terms of other side projects and things, are things that I've helped other people with. Like, so over the years, I've built a content management system called Statamic.
Oh, yeah.
Which is now in like version 3, I think. I'm not involved with it anymore, but, it's got like 4 people working on it. It's used by some pretty large, I think Asana uses it for their website, and Spiegel over in Germany uses it for their website as well. So it's kind of used a lot. I worked with a couple of people from south of England, actually, on Q, so QUUU.co. It's kind of a social media content tool. There's probably about 8 people working on that now as well. I kind of help to get those started. And then most recently, like Founderpath itself started as kind of a side project, side hustle thing. And now for the last 18 months or so, it's been my full-time thing.
That's a perfect segue as well, I think. I mean, I just want to touch on a couple of things before we move on. Your football side project that came out of a personal passion. Obviously, that was your main motivator. So I completely relate with that. So I think I created like a World Cup calendar using microformats. It was like a new concept back in 2006. So you know what? Let's just mash the two together and see what happens. And like you, I think a few people got wind of it, shoved it in the press, and the traffic went through the roof. I was like flabbergasted personally. But it personally, it was like, I made something for me, not for you. And I'm just glad everyone else enjoyed it now. That's, right. I was quite young and naive as well at the time. It's like, what's all this about? So I get that. It's amazing, though, how viral things can go when you don't even try it to be. It fascinates me that, people think they can make something viral. This is the beauty of viral. It happens naturally.
Yeah, I think often when you try and make things go viral, that's when it falls flat on its face too, right? Like, I mean, like I think people can tell like that you're really, one, you can build something for yourself and people can see your interest and your passion kind of in that thing, versus if you just try and do something for the sake of, I want to just try and get this to be popular and I don't really care about the thing that I'm working on. I think people see through that quite easily, I think,
society's getting a little bit more aware of this as well. We're not as fickle as we used to be. Yes. But it's a great segue. So let's talk about Founderpath. You mentioned it that started about 18 months ago. Can you tell us about what it actually is and where it came about from as well?
Yeah. So what it is right now is a new way to give founders of SaaS companies access to capital. So in the past, if you ran a startup or a company of any kind, if you needed to go, if you need some funding to go spend on, marketing, sales, hire people, whatever it happened to be, the sort of only options that you had were to go to a venture capital company and sell some percentage of your shares, and hopefully you can find a VC who's kind of interested in that. And so we found there was a lot of people who had somewhat good, stable businesses that they wanted to go and kind of help expand, and they didn't really want to work in that VC space in terms of, one, they didn't want to sell any of their shares, they didn't want to establish a board and then have like monthly meetings or quarterly meetings or whatever it hell was and all that kind of stuff. But banks didn't really understand them in terms of, you're an online SaaS company, we don't understand that, like, what's your revenue, where's your customers? They're like, well, they're all over the world. People just don't understand that. So what Founderpath allows you to do is connect your subscription platform that you use, so Stripe, Chargebee, Chargeify, etc. So we then analyze your historical subscriber information. So we know how long people have been your customers. We know what your LTV is, your lifetime value of your customers. We understand your retention rates, your churn rates, all those kind of things. And based on that, we can say, look, we know how healthy and stable your business is. We can just loan you some money based on the sort of assets you have, and your assets are your customers. And so we don't take any equity. We don't want any personal guarantees or anything like that. And so for some percentage interest rate, effectively, we can loan founders some money that they can use however they want to grow their company.
Very cool. And it's nice that you've used your knowledge from the industry, especially from your years of experience, how to evaluate the risk attached to that loan with real metrics that are actually relevant to what you do as well.
Yeah, and so I've got some exposure to that, and so I know some of that stuff. But so it started with the company was actually started by somebody called Nathan Hacker, who has actually a very popular podcast. It's just called The Top, where he basically interviews founders of fast-growing SaaS companies. And so he's been doing that for about 5 years, I think. And so he's interviewed probably a few thousand founders.
Wow.
And so, so he's been doing it for a while. But like, also interviewing people that weren't very big but are now, like the guys from Zoom, the guys from ConvertKit, and so all of the sort of large SaaS companies that now, he interviewed them when they were like a year old. So he kind of tapped into them, and he knows all the things that they were interested in, all the things that they were looking at in terms of how do you build a stable, successful kind of SaaS company. So he really understands the industry way better than I do, but he doesn't know how to write code. So we got introduced by an acquaintance of ours. So he had this idea, like he'd spoken to a lot of the sort of founders who were really complaining about not having access to capital in the sort of way that some other larger established companies do. Spoke to me about it, and we kind of figured out like what we could build and how we could automate a lot of that stuff, because obviously you can do a lot of this stuff manually in terms of like looking at people's accounts and seeing how you can kind of analyze what their historical expenses are and things like that. And we were like, well, that's not very efficient. We can't really scale that up particularly well. And so we've gone from 0 to, I believe at last count, we have about $13 million out now. Wow. And we're hoping to get, much north of 25-30 million by the end of the year, because we've been able to use the software that we built to really streamline and kind of optimize kind of how it all works.
I mean, success story on success story by the sound of it. You kind of use that platform with Nathan and all his background as well, and then your technical understanding as well, and just merge the two into some super product now. Yeah. So you talked about how you've collaborated with Nathan on this product, this Founderpath. Can you tell us a bit about the tech stack behind the scenes? Because I think this is what's going to fascinate some of our audience. Like, how do you make something so rapidly, let's say, not quickly, but rapidly?
Yeah, I mean, I try, even though I like new things and I like shiny objects, and I get attracted to shiny objects like a lot of people do. I try and like really keep those for like the fun weekend hackathon, hacking kind of projects, right? And that's why I do a lot of those as well. But when it comes to something like building Q and building Founderpath and building Statomake and things like that, those things that I know could have the potential for being like a long-term thing, that the point isn't to play with the tech. The point is to build something and launch something really fast so that you can so it can be on the market, and then you can kind of see how the market likes it and things like that. For a lot of that stuff, I stick to stuff that I know really well.
Sure.
And so because I've been coding for a long time, I know a lot of languages really well, fortunately, but most of my tech stack these days, I stick to very boring vanilla. Like I use PHP on the back end. It means I can host it. There's like a million places I can host it. I don't have to find a special hosting for it. I use the Laravel PHP framework, which is really popular, but it also comes with a lot of stuff, right? Like I don't have to build authentication. I don't have to build data migration tools. It comes with migration. It comes with authentication. It's got hosting set up. I use the Forge service from Taylor Otwell, who's the author of Laravel, which means that I can write my code really quickly, point and click essentially to set up a server and have it hosted within hours. Like I've gone from I've done a lot of hackathons over the years too, where you literally just stay up all night and just kind of launch stuff and you can make it. But also I've had ideas in the past where just working at home on my own, I've gone from idea, empty canvas, and launched something in production within 8 hours.
Yep. And that's the beauty of knowing your frameworks as well, isn't it? The languages that you've learned over the years. I'm a fellow PHP fan for my sins. I know some of the people might sneer out there, but like you say, with the frameworks out there, why waste your time? If you just want to get a product to market, use what you got. If you want to learn new tech, take your time.
Right. And like I said, it depends entirely on what your side project idea is. Obviously, if you're in the Web3 space, you want to do something with machine learning or something like that, then you're going to have to learn JavaScript or Python or something like that. But then you're not going to launch anything in sort of 8 hours, right? You're going to spend 2 or 3 weeks just learning what the hell this new ecosystem is before you can actually build the thing that you actually want to build as well. And and then so over the years, that's what's always kind of surprised people a little bit. They're like, well, you built that in PHP? I'm like, yeah, like I don't think the people using the product really care. Like all the founders that come to Founderpath don't care that it's using PHP on the back end. They're still going to access a website, and whether that's in JavaScript or Next or whatever, they could care less. And I think most people, I think that always surprises people is like, well, do you care what Facebook is written in? Because it's written in PHP.
Exactly. And they are probably the best example to call out, really, aren't they?
Well, even Yahoo originally was written in PHP as well. So, sort of the sort of giants of their era, even AOL, like all of their WordPress blogs, all of the blogs that were popular inside of AOL were all on WordPress as well. And so, PHP's been around for a reason. Like it does the job. And as long as you're concerned about getting the job done, then the sort of tech stack ultimately doesn't really, it shouldn't concern you really. And that's, and actually, like you said, once you've built something once with it, the second one just becomes so much easier. And so now, I can knock ideas out in sort of hours now.
That's that. I mean, testament to your mindset really is like using that skill and just got an idea and ship it by the end of the day. And like, wow, people go, that blows our mind sometimes. I'm not going to learn a new stack. I don't want to care about the new tech. I just want to make something and see the result by the end of the day.
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you don't launch something, then like what's the point? I've spoken to a bunch of people who are like, I'm really struggling launching my side project, and and then they walk me through like, well, first I started with Next and that didn't work, so I moved to Express and that didn't work. I'm like, yeah, but why did you even try that in the first place? Like, what's your skill set? What's the thing that you've been coding with at your day job for the last 10 years? why didn't you use that? It's just like, and I think people just, like I said, I mean, I understand it. Like I said at the beginning, I like shiny objects. I love to explore new things. But you really have to ask yourself, like, why are you building this thing? Are you building it to learn something new, which is a really good reason to kind of have it out there, like, but then it's going to take you time, and I think people have to understand that. But if you're like, well, I really like this side hustle, I like this idea, I think I can make some money from it, then new tech is kind of just keep it out of your mind and just like build with what you understand.
Totally. I completely concur with you on that. There's two goals here. I want to get something to market. I want to learn something. Those two don't go in hand very well, unfortunately.
Right. And like I said, it's kind of okay if you want to learn something. And you never know what's going to hit either, in terms of like what's going to become popular and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, at the end of the day, you have to ship. Right. Yeah. So whatever helps you ship fastest, that's usually what I sort of like to kind of stick with.
I like that mentality. So can you talk me through your typical working day? Because it sounds like there is no such thing as a typical day, but sort of the things that you might do throughout a typical week then, or if it's a real mix.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it kind of depends on, like, I mean, I tend to use my energy however I feel like using my energy, and I think that's the sort of thing that I've been really, I should say I've been really fortunate. So as well as being on the sort of early internet train and being part of the web and stuff, in about 2000, in the summer of 2000, I got my first remote job. So again, way long before COVID and everybody doing the whole remote thing, I got very lucky in that I was leaving New York City, and I was interviewing at a few places to kind of see where I might be working. And one of the companies in New York, even though I told them I was leaving New York, they offered me a job. And I was like, well, I'm leaving New York. And they said, well, that's okay. You can leave New York and still come work for us. Which, like I said, back in 2000 was kind of kind of heard of. And but it kind of broke the shackles of the 9 to 5. Like I didn't have to like travel to an office. I didn't have to like sit at a table from 9 to 5. I didn't have to do my work, and then I'd have to leave. And so I kind of got to set my own schedule and work whenever I wanted to on whatever I wanted to when I felt like working on it. And so I got into the mindset of like, I got a list of things I need to do. I can do them at 8 o'clock in the morning if I want to. I can do them at 6 o'clock at night if I want to, or 11 o'clock at night if I want to. And so this idea of like just using your energy whenever you have the energy for something, when you feel like working on something, work on it. And when you don't feel like working on something, find something else to work on instead. So my work day is very sporadic in that I'll wake up so part of my schedule is controlled by my kids. So based on like, if they're at school, then I've got a school schedule. I have to help them in the mornings and get ready for school. We kind of hang out once they get home after work and things like that. But in terms of my work schedule, I mean, obviously you have meetings and things that you have to attend and things like that. So that's just kind of happens, and you kind of have to accept it. But in terms of the actual work, some days I'll wake up at sort of 8, I'll start work at 8 o'clock in the morning and just work for a few hours and get all of my like Founderpath stuff kind of finished, because I know I have a list of things that I have to do. I'll just run through them because I'm just in that mindset. I'm in that mood, and I just want to run through it and just kind of have it all out the way. And then in the afternoon, I'll just be like, I feel like tinkering on something else. And so nice. I'll find something else to work on. And whether it's a side project or something to do with Founderpath that it wasn't on my list of things that I'm supposed to be working on, but it's just something that I'm interested in, something I'm curious about. But it's just not something I had to do. So I'm kind of interested in it instead. And then some days it's the other way around, right? Like I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I don't want to think about SaaS and retention rates and cohorts and things like that. I just don't want to think about that. So I'll go work on one of my side projects instead. But then I'll feel like energized because I did something fun. I did something interesting. I'll sit down after lunch and be like, I've got this stuff I need to do for Founderpath, and I'll just run through that instead. So that flexibility of being able to kind of work on what you feel like working on, and not being shackled to, oh shit, I'm at the office, I got to do office work now. I mean, I think I think that was like, I got lucky there as well. I wasn't planning on doing the whole remote thing. But that just opened up it just opened up more time as well. Like I didn't waste an hour every day on the train, in a car or something like that. And so I just now all of a sudden had like 2 extra hours a day. That's an extra 20% that you just didn't have previously.
If you need help with your side project, either for inspiration, support, or just general feedback, remember to join our On the Side community on Slack. There are a number of previous guests from the podcast in there, including Sam Hardacre, Mike Street, Dom Hodgson, and Mark Lismore. Pop on over to ontheside.network, which will take you straight through to registration, and I'll see you in there. You mentioned the kids. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But the fact that you're not bound by the 9 to 5, as you call out. You have got your flexibility around that space, but equally you've got goals every day. It's not like you kind of just going, I don't know what I'm going to do, I'll just pick up what is next. You have well, I do need to do some Founderpath stuff at some point, but I'm not in the mood this morning. I want to get awesome, do some fun stuff which will energize me, and then I will do that stuff because I've got the better mindset. And having that flexibility must be so liberating for you.
I mean, you do. I mean, I know a lot of people that tried to do the remote thing and they just failed because they just didn't have having the sort of 9 to 5 and being in the office kind of forced them to do the work. But when they were at home in front of, on sort of in their living room, sat with their laptops on sort of on their laps and watching TV, they found that they didn't actually do any work.
Okay.
because nobody was there watching them. And so you do have to have that structure. I mean, I've had a separate office that I use all the time. When I'm working, I'm at work. When I'm upstairs watching TV, I'm upstairs watching TV. Right? I'm not at work kind of at that point as well. So you do have to have some structure, and you do have to have that self-discipline to know, look, yes, I don't have to work 9 to 5. I don't have to work specific hours, but I have things I need to get accomplished. I mean, I did feel a little bit bad when I first started doing the remote work, because I was like, well, I'm getting all this stuff done in a few hours. I feel like I'm like cheating my employer in terms of like, I'm not spending 8 hours a day working on this stuff. And so I felt kind of bad, but then I sat down and thought about it for a bit, and I was like, when I'm at the office though, I don't really work 8 hours, right? Like you go to the cooler, or the water cooler, you go make a coffee, you talk around, you stand around for 20 minutes talking to other people. You're not actually working 8 hours a day anyway. And then you go and leave for lunch, and you have a long lunch, and then you go leave in the afternoon to grab another coffee from Starbucks or whatever. I'm just like, so really, even when you're at the office, even though you're bound to the 9 to 5, you're actually still only productive for 3 or 4 hours a day at max. Totally. And so if I'm productive at home for 3 or 4 hours, I've got another 3 or 4 hours where I can do whatever the heck I want to. And don't feel bad about it. Like you're still getting the things that you need to get done, still get finished on time. And if that's what you can aim for, then I think you should be happy with that too.
Absolutely. And I mean, you reminded me actually, I think back in the day when I was in the office with some engineering teams, we did some estimation around some work, and we'd work it out and go, realistically, we're going to do about 4 hours a day out of 8, right? Of actual productive time. So factor that into your estimations, not the fact that, it's going to take 2 or 3 days. Yeah, okay, so double that, because literally you're going to do 4 hours of work a day. Right. But you're right. And I think if you can get things done in that time, why waste it? You know what I mean? But it also gives you a bit of a buffer. You can go, you know what, I can go a bit above and beyond now. I've got a bit of extra time to do something cool for you. Or you've given me some capacity to do some extra research or whatever it might be, or have some downtime and feel better about myself rather than slogging away and stressing about the timelines. So it sounds like you've got a lovely environment and time boxed element to what you do every day now.
Yeah, I mean, and also just having the flexibility of the schedule, right? Like if I need to leave the house and go spend time with the kids, or take the kids to the pediatrician or whatever it is, I can do that, and then I'll come home at night and work instead. Like I'll just make up that time, and having that option and having that flexibility to set your own schedule and keep your mental health as well. I think that's one of the things that you just mentioned. I think that's really, I think a lot of people didn't really consider the sort of the drag of just like being, you know, like the commute to work kind of starts your day off poorly, and then it just like it's not you don't feel energized when you arrive at work, because you just have the sort of life sucked out you just to get to the office in sort of in the first place. And now, you know, my commute is like 20 seconds, you know, like I can roll out of bed and be working 20 seconds after I wake up if I want to. It doesn't happen very often, but no. You know, if there was an emergency or something, I could.
Technically possible, but probably logistically not.
Yes, you still need to make coffee and wake up and kind of
work out what's going on for the day.
Right.
That's cool, man. That's cool. And you've mentioned the kids a few times now. So you're a family man, and obviously I imagine they're at school.
So yeah, I have one kid who's in their final year of high school now, and one who's 4 years younger than that now. So I've been through the whole like young kid and trying to do side projects and hustling at the same time, and now they're at school. Now it's much easier because they have their own friends and they do their own thing as well. So it's just kind of opened up my my sort of options again.
Yeah, and I actually, that's a good point, because I think I was similar when I had my first one. I was in my 20s and I was really into my side projects, but realistically, I was burning the candle at both ends, and it was and work was suffering in the consequence as well. So I would be neglecting my real day job and focusing on the side projects rather than my kid and my job. But it's only on hindsight I can go, yeah, I need to stop that and reassess. But so you've now got two elders, which give you a bit more capacity to do the fun stuff, like you mentioned.
Yes. No, I mean, and now that they're all, I mean, still, I mean, in many ways, it's much easier now. They text me from time to time, not as much as I'd like to as being a parent and stuff like that. But they're, you know, they get onto the school bus in the morning, and then I've got my day free, and then they come home and they still have homework and things like that to do as well. So, you know, I use their homework time to kind of do some work on my side projects and kind of things like that too.
That's crazy.
And then and then you know, once they're finished, you know, we'll still, you know, we've made the point of every day, you know, as much as you can based on schedules and things like that, but we still eat dinner as a family together and kind of things like that. So we still have some things that we keep that routine, even though now the kids leave home at different times, they get back at different times because of the way that the school system works here. But then we kind of make that time to make sure that we all sit around the table and kind of make sure we have the conversations about how was your day and kind of what have you been up to and all that kind of fun stuff as well. But then, like I said, now that they do have their own friends and their own schedule and stuff, you know, I can now work my schedule a little bit more freely now and kind of have the works thing and but also do the side project thing. And it's also been interesting now, you know, like I haven't forced my kids like to like coding like I did or anything like that, but we've now, you know, they're very much more artistic than I am, because my wife is more artistic than I am. But so I've tried to rope them into like, I'm building this website. Do you think I should use this color or should I use this color for the logo and the, you know, so I've tried to expose them to building a website without them necessarily having to do like the work of coding and things like that, just to show them that you can do this kind of thing even if you don't want to become a coder like I am.
And it's great that you're exposing them to what you do, because I was speaking to Dan Moore in a previous episode and he was saying similar. He's got very young kids, but he had a commitment and he wanted the kids to realize, you know, I'm writing a book, I've got a deadline. Dad's going to be a bit busy tonight. So, you know, do something else and we'll catch up at the weekend. But by getting them realizing that you've got these commitments or other things that you like to enjoy doing, might spark some inspiration in them and some discipline going forward as well.
Yeah. It's been interesting, you know, I think for them especially because I work from home as well. They're you know, when they were a little bit younger, it was a little bit confusing for them. They're like, Dad, you're home. How can you be working? Like, I speak to, when they speak to their friends, it's like, well, my dad, works in some office somewhere. They're like, but my dad works from home.
City boy or something like that. Yeah.
Right. So it was, I mean, but because I had that separate like office, it was literally like, if the door's closed, I'm working. Like I'm at the office at that point. So it was kind of helpful for them to understand that. And then, over the years, I mean, like, I've showed them, like when I did the whole Will Robots project, it was kind of crazy because they would just see it in random places because it was on like random TV stations, it was in newspapers and all sorts of things like that as well. So I would kind of show them a few of the sort of snippets and things, and I would share some links around and things like that. Like, well, that's on MSN. Like, I know what MSN is, and kind of stuff like that. So it was cool to kind of have them be kind of exposed to all that stuff as well.
Totally, and actually a bit of pride in there as well. It's like, look, kids, I made that, and you could do something like that in the future as well.
I think I'm trying to find it now where I put it, but one of the most not inspirational, but one of my proudest moments in terms of side projects and things like was in 2016. I won the Product Hunt Maker of the Year award. And so, I mean, it doesn't sound particularly fancy to like in sort of 8-year-old or whatever. But then once I won the award, Product Hunt sent me like the trophy that you get for winning.
Amazing.
So it's like a golden kitty, which is the Product Hunt sort of mascot. So when that arrived in the mail and I opened the box up and the kids saw it, they were kind of amazed. They were like, Dad, you won an award and you got a trophy for it? I was like, yeah, I mean, it's not quite the Oscars, but it's kind of amazing that somebody would send you an award. And so that sat upstairs, like sort of in the living room for a while because my kids were kind of amazed that somebody thought I was that good. And I thought I was good enough to have a trophy.
Totally, and you should definitely put that pride of place in your office at least, if not down in the living room.
Yeah, it is here now in terms of it lives with me now, but for a while it stayed upstairs.
Nice, very cool. So, have you got any other sort of side projects going on at the moment? You got Founderpath taking up a lot of your time, obviously, but you said you got time to do other things. What are you looking into at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, so right now I'm really, in terms of long term, and it's actually, this is me like using side projects even for Founderpath stuff as well in terms of like what might be important and relevant in the future as well. So, I'm really interested in like the Web3 space because I think it's the next iteration of kind of everything that we've been working up to this point in terms of the internet and openness and have access to all of those kind of things. So sort of NFTs and DeFi and DSO and stuff like that I think is really interesting. DeFi in particular, just because of my Founderpath stuff, is really interesting to me right now because at some point people are going to stop raising money from venture capital and stop getting loans from banks and things like that. They're gonna log on to the internet somewhere and log on to some blockchain protocol and suddenly have a way to have access to capital that they didn't have to in the past. So that to me is really interesting because I don't know what that looks like. I don't think anybody really understands what that looks like yet. But for somebody like Founderpath, it's really important for us to understand what that might look like. And so I've just been spending a lot of time kind of doing a deep dive into that whole world, and that's even though it's like an evolution of kind of what we've been doing with the internet and kind of Web 2, it's an entirely new kind of Wild West kind of as it is right now.
Definitely. I mean, I think you caught my interest with BitClouts recently and all that side of things. Is it DSO, decentralized social networks?
Yes, exactly.
I think I just chucked like 15 quid in just to see what's this all about, and I realised that's what decentralized finance is all about. Really, throwing money at it and see what happens. Right.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, we're still, probably still a few years away from it being mainstream or anything like that. But like with most waves, if you want to catch them, it's best to catch them early. Like, you know, in 1997, 1998, you know, nobody really knew what the internet was or kind of what it could be. By the time it hit, you know, all of the people like me have been doing it for a few years and really, you know, kind of really had a good handle on it. I think that's what I'm trying to do with this stuff as well. It's like nobody knows what it's going to be, but you kind of know that it can't be stopped at this point because that wave's already crescendoing and it's going to hit soon. And so I just want to try and get on that wave as kind of early as I can.
Yep, and you don't want to miss the boat either with that metaphor of waves as well. It's here now. Yeah. People are doing stuff with it, and I think I even saw PayPal today say they're accepting cryptos in some shape or form. But well, if those kind of guys are doing it, we can't ignore it, and I'd rather be in it now than after it's all kind of crashed effectively.
Right. And yeah, and like I said, even if you don't know what it is, I mean, like just being involved with it, it kind of reminds me of the same kind of thing where it's like nobody knew what Twitter and Facebook would kind of become ultimately. Nope. But you know, I signed up for Twitter in like 2008 or 2009, I think.
Yeah,
I didn't use it for like good 2 or 3 years after, really. I mean, I signed up for it and I was like, well, this is kind of interesting, but not really what I'm interested in right now. But I had an account, I had my username, I had it all like locked up. And then when it became popular, I was like, oh, well, I'm already here. You know, like I've been here for ages. But, and I think it's the same with this. Like, I mean, even now it's like, well, if I buy a handful of NFTs or whatever, they probably won't be worth anything now, but in 5 or 10 years, I bet you they're worth a lot.
Absolutely. And I think like you, I was intrigued by the social network Web 2.0 back in those late noughties. So again, just play with it and see where it's going to go. And people are still fascinated by the fact I've got SI as a Twitter name. How the hell did you manage that? I got in there early, mate, just to see what it was all about. And luckily it worked out, you know?
Right.
But yeah, I didn't do it for that reason. It was just like, yeah, early adopting is in our nature, I guess, as some techno geeks from the 80s. You know, we love to see where it goes and try and play around with things, which is effectively what side projects are all about for me.
And you have an inkling, right? Like, I mean, like it's not like it's complete. It's not like you're just trying everything out there. Like, there's some things that you just see and you're like, that's gonna work. Now, whether it's that particular, you know, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or whatever, you don't know which thing will actually end up winning, but you know that social media was going to be a thing, and you knew that, you know, sort of Ethereum and blockchain and that technology is going to be a thing. Now, whether it's Bitcoin who wins or Ethereum who wins or Polygon or, you know, who the heck knows, like that's above my pay grade, but I know blockchain is the future, you know, and so just understanding the space and understanding who might win, you know, so throw a little bit into Ethereum, throw a little bit into Bitcoin, because ultimately if they win, you're going to be glad that you that you threw that little bit in there as well.
Bit of time, right? Yeah, that's a fair point. I just realised we've been going on for 45 minutes. So just one final question, I guess, for you is, what would be your one major tip for anyone that wants to make time for side projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think what most people fall down, as I think we talked a little bit about, in terms of like, you know, like just trying to do too much in terms of learning something new and launching something and stuff like that. I think the other thing that people struggle with is like, I don't have any time, right? Like, I understand that. Like, I've got a job, I've got a family, I've got friends. I want to go hang out with them. I want to go do things. It doesn't really take a lot of time. Even if you spend 30 minutes a day, you know, like if you spend an hour a day, it's amazing how much progress you can make. So that's the one thing I would tell people is like, just do it. Because even though you think you need a lot, absolutely. And I think and ultimately it doesn't really take as long as you think either. Like, I think people like it's going to take me months to build this side project and things like that. No, it's seriously, I mean, the state of tech these days, it's really easy to build things and really fast as well. And you don't even need tech to build things, right? Like with all these no code options and things like that, you don't need to be an engineer. You don't need to be somebody who has the sort of skills to build things anymore. And so that's, even though I got started really, you know, early, and really young, I think a lot of people are leaving a lot of potential on the floor by not just start. Yeah, even with things like social media, right? Like the sooner you join, the sooner you start posting, the quicker you'll get followers, and the quicker you'll get people that you meet online that you can work with on projects and things like that as well. But people, I mean, I know I waited a long time to really get active on social media, even though I signed up for Twitter really early on. And, those are the kind of things I wish I had done kind of earlier, just building up the audience and kind of things like that. Because then when you do launch a side project, now you actually have, like somebody to go look at it as well, which I think is really the sort of other side of things that, people like me, I think did struggle with for a long time, in that just because you build it, no, they won't just come, right? Like you kind of do have to build that audience sort of up front so that you can put it out there and people will kind of respond to it, hopefully. But yeah, so that's the thing I would kind of recommend to people is, yes, you need to make progress when you can, but do it now, but then also think about like who your audience is as well.
Two very good pieces of advice there, actually. Sorry. So one, find the time and just get on with it. And two, make sure you get it out there, because otherwise you don't know if it's going to work anyway.
Right.
Love it. Good job, Mubs. Thanks ever so much for your advice and your backstories. I'm hoping the listeners enjoyed and found it fascinating. If they want to reach out to you and see some of the other cool stuff you've been making, how do they do that?
Still active on Twitter now, more so these days. So twitter.com/Bashir Iqbal. Also on BitClout, which is the sort of decentralized social media that hopefully will start to take hold of. Also the same handle there as well. And then in true hacker fashion, I built a website called iworkedon.com, which allows you to build like a quick little portfolio of all the things that you've worked on. And so if you go to iworkedon.com, you'll see a list of I think I haven't listed every project there. I think I've only got 99 listed there.
Wow.
But there's a lot more that I haven't listed there.
Plenty of places to find you then, and we'll get all those links in the show notes as well.
And I was going to say, my last thing, that 99 is purely side projects, right? So all the things that I've done during the day jobs at the agencies I worked at and things like that, that's not included in that. So there's lots more. If you, I guess if you're that way inclined, you can look at my LinkedIn as well if you want to. But I don't really spend a lot of time on LinkedIn.
No, let's stick with Twitter and your own websites. That makes sense.
Yes.
Mubs, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you for joining me on the podcast this week, and hopefully you enjoyed it as well.
I did, absolutely. Yeah, and absolutely, if anybody who's listening has any questions about side projects and building stuff, I do read all of my DMs and I respond when I can.
I can vouch for that as well, because it was only through Twitter DMs that we managed to arrange this.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Mubs. Good to chat.
Thanks for having me on.
It was so good to have Mubs on the Make Life Work podcast with us. Such an inspiration for any aspiring side project hustler, with plenty pro tips on making it work, amongst all his other commitments and enjoyments. You can always check out founderpath.com for more details about financing your SaaS project, or obviously follow Mubs on Twitter to find out more about many of his side projects. As for the podcast, we obviously love to hear your thoughts. Get in touch on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, as @MakeLifeWorkPod. You can email hello@makelifeworkpodcast.com, or even visit the website makelifeworkpodcast.com for all the show notes and archives. And please remember to rate and review us in your favourite podcast app. That concludes Season 7 of the Make Life Work podcast. I'd like to thank all the guests we've had this series: Shari Mahima, Jamie Lyon and Wookie, Dan Moore, Sylvia Costa and Eli Ochula, and last but no means least, Mubs. I'd also like to thank all you lovely loyal listeners and any new time followers for listening along, plus my wife and kids for supporting this project during our downtime. I'll be back in 2022 for another 5 episodes with Season 8 of the Make Life Work podcast.